Can the Cudgel monks beat the shield unit? Hello everyone. In this video, we're evaluating the potential of the Cudgel monk, focusing on the new blunt damage runes it can use. While the unit was unlocked 6 months ago, I had overlooked it because its damage output was mediocre. However, with the newly implemented runes, a significant increase in firepower is expected, so I'm going to test if they can become a counter to shield-bearing units. Let's get started. The doctrines and veterancy used are as follows. Once this unit is unlocked, it has the potential to fight against higher tier units, depending on the doctrines applied. There are 2 main skills. The first skill is 6-way staff. This is a so-called charge skill, and after the charge, there's a certain chance to activate a consecutive blunt damage attack. The activation probability seems to depend on the number of remaining soldiers. The second skill is Windmill Strike. This skill performs a consecutive blunt damage attack on the spot. The block damage inflicted is approximately this much. With this level of performance, they'd be just a normal 3-star unit, but all of their attacks apply a debuff and a buff, and they stack. The debuff provides a maximum of 50% defense reduction, and the buff gives a maximum of 50% blunt damage increase. The damage trend during the debuff is shown here. A consecutive blunt attack skill has a 22% chance of activating even during a normal attack. By the way, I should point out 3 errors in the Japanese description. It is described as slashing damage even though it is blunt damage. Next, the translation is entirely incorrect. Last, the debuff performance changes with each stack, but the translation contents are completely different. I will test how the damage changes with and without the runes, keeping all other conditions the same. But before that, some people might wonder why Cudgel monks and not mace sergeants, so I'll prove their strength. This situation perfectly illustrates how the difference in doctrines significantly impacts unit performance. If you want more details, check out my past videos. Now let's move on to the rune verification. The initial damage difference is around 100 to 400, but this gap widens as the unit takes hits due to the effect of the debuff. By the way, how many video viewers can explain the damage variance? I knew that damage values are somewhat random and not identical, but I had never calculated the variance, so I calculated it based on actual data. The character stats of the unit taking damage and the unit used are shown here. I assumed that the formula above is likely used for damage calculation. Therefore, by selecting a normal attack, the skill multiplier is set to 1, and the defense value is considered 0, simplifying the formula and making it easier to estimate the random number generation part. The result is here. The conclusion is that the attack damage has a variance of roughly plus or minus 5% of the attack damage. In other words, the variance is large for high damage and nearly uniform for low damage. The damage variance also increases with headshots and critical hits. Incidentally, when checking the back attack multiplier, it was likely around 1.5. Since the calculation of damage variance has progressed, I performed the actual damage calculation. I modified the defense part for Conqueror's blade and calculated what the damage would be based on the character stats of the unit taking damage. Judging by the variance, it's quite small, suggesting that the damage is fluctuating by plus or minus 5% in the final line. Substituting the values into the formula resulted in a higher damage output, so I set the constant to minus 87. Next, I tested with an 8% attack power buff and found that the calculated values were very close to the formula. Then I tested whether the damage calculated by the formula is output when the Cudgel Monk's buff and debuff are applied with the equipment. The unit stats are like this. For now, I'll let them attack until the buff and debuff reach their maximum values. The defense reduction seems to be mitigated internally by a debuff percentage, so the defense reduction rate was set as 1 minus x times 1.2. Nevertheless, you can see that the skill damage increases significantly due to the effect of the buff and debuff. I tested their usability this time, and the conclusion is that they are very useful. They can defeat higher tier units, but ultimately, they are just a niche unit for special occasions. There aren't many units that can use the runes, but other units might perform even better. The damage output and damage calculation formula are still in the trial phase, so please don't assume this is perfectly correct.